Claire Matthews sat at the corner table of Romano's, one of the city's most upscale restaurants, clutching her phone with trembling fingers. The elegant cream-colored dress she wore had been borrowed from her roommate, and the $5 bill hidden in her small purse represented the last of her money until her next paycheck arrived in 3 days. At 26, Claire worked 2 jobs to support herself while finishing her nursing degree. Between her shifts at the campus bookstore and weekend hours at a local clinic, she barely had time to breathe, let alone date. But her best friend Rachel had been insistent about this blind date, claiming that Claire needed to put herself out there and that her cousin's friend was absolutely perfect for her. Now, looking at the menu where appetizers started at $18, Claire felt her stomach knot with anxiety. She had assumed they would meet at a casual cafe, not a restaurant where the cheapest entree cost more than she spent on groceries in a week. Her date, Michael Brennan, had arrived 10 minutes late in an expensive suit, already checking his watch and scrolling through his phone. He was handsome enough, with perfectly styled hair and confident posture, but there was something cold about his demeanor that made Claire uncomfortable. "Sorry I'm late," Michael said, without looking up from his screen. "Important call from Singapore. You know how it is with international markets." Claire didn't know how it was with international markets, but she smiled politely. "No problem. Thank you for choosing such a lovely restaurant." At the table adjacent to theirs, Daniel Morgan sat quietly with his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, celebrating her successful piano recital earlier that evening. At 34, Daniel had built his consulting firm from nothing after his wife's death 3 years earlier. But he had learned that success meant little without someone to share it with. Emma, wearing her favorite blue dress with tiny stars, had been chattering excitedly about her performance when she noticed the young woman at the neighboring table. There was something about the way the blonde woman kept looking at her menu with worried eyes that caught Emma's attention. "Daddy, why does that lady look sad?" Emma whispered. Daniel glanced over discreetly and observed Claire's situation with the practiced eye of someone who had once struggled himself. He recognized the careful way she held the menu, the nervous fidgeting with her phone, and the forced smile she wore while her date ignored her. "I'm not sure, sweetheart," Daniel replied softly. "Sometimes grown-ups have difficult days." At Claire's table, Michael had finally put down his phone and was studying the wine list. "I think we should start with the 2018 Bordeaux. It's only $80 a bottle, quite reasonable for a wine of that caliber." Claire's heart sank. $80 would cover her groceries for 2 weeks. "Actually, I was thinking maybe just water for me tonight. I'm not much of a drinker." Michael looked at her with barely concealed irritation. "Come on, Claire. Live a little. Rachel said you were fun." "I am fun," Claire said quietly. "But I prefer to stay clear-headed on a first date." What she didn't say was that she was calculating how she might afford even a salad and still have bus fare to get home. The waiter approached their table with practiced professionalism. "Good evening. Have you had a chance to review our menu?" Michael immediately launched into an elaborate order: the lobster bisque, the dry-aged ribeye with truffle butter, and yes, that bottle of Bordeaux. The waiter turned expectantly to Claire. "I'll just have a garden salad, please," she said, her voice barely audible. "That's it?" Michael asked with a laugh that wasn't entirely kind. "A salad? Are you on some kind of diet?" Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm just not very hungry tonight." From the next table, Daniel watched this interaction with growing concern. He had seen enough business dinners to recognize when someone was struggling financially but trying to maintain their dignity. Emma, who possessed the intuitive empathy that children often display, tugged gently on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can we help the sad lady somehow?" "What do you mean, Em?" Daniel asked, though he was already considering the same question. "She looks like she wants to cry. Like when you thought you couldn't pay for my piano lessons and you got that quiet, worried look." Daniel remembered that time well. It had been during the early days of building his company, when every dollar mattered and pride had nearly prevented him from accepting help from his own father. He looked at Claire again and made a decision that would surprise even himself. Daniel excused himself from Emma and approached the maitre d', a distinguished gentleman named Giuseppe, who had managed Romano's for over 20 years. "The young lady at table 12, Daniel said quietly. "I'd like to cover her entire meal tonight, including anything her companion orders. But please don't tell them where it's coming from. Can you arrange that discreetly?" Giuseppe studied Daniel's face and nodded with understanding. "Of course, Mr. Morgan. Would you prefer we tell them it's a promotional evening or perhaps a gift from management?" "Whatever seems most natural," Daniel replied. "I just don't want her to feel embarrassed about accepting it." As their meals progressed, Claire found herself increasingly uncomfortable with Michael's behavior. He spoke exclusively about his investment portfolio, his expensive car, and his recent vacation to the Hamptons. When she mentioned her nursing studies, he dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "Healthcare is so depressing," he said between bites of his ribeye. "I couldn't deal with sick people all day." "You should consider something more lucrative, like pharmaceutical sales." Claire felt a spark of anger override her anxiety. "I chose nursing because I want to help people heal. It's my calling, not just a paycheck," Michael shrugged. "If you say so. Though I have to say, Rachel led me to believe you had more ambition than that." At the neighboring table, Emma had finished her pasta and was quietly observing the interaction with the wisdom that children sometimes possess. "Daddy," she whispered, "I don't think that man is very nice to the pretty lady." Daniel had reached the same conclusion. Michael's dismissive attitude toward Claire reminded him of the executives he encountered in business, who valued profit over people. But what impressed him most was how Claire maintained her composure and dignity despite the obvious slight. When their waiter returned to refill water glasses, Giuseppe appeared beside him with a warm smile. "Excuse me," he said to Claire and Michael, "but I wanted to personally inform you that tonight is Romano's pay-it-forward evening. Your entire meal has been sponsored by another diner who wishes to remain anonymous. They simply ask that you enjoy your evening and perhaps extend the same kindness to someone else when the opportunity arises." Claire stared at Giuseppe in amazement. "I'm sorry, what do you mean sponsored?" "Your bill has been completely covered," Giuseppe explained gently. "Please order anything else you'd like. Dessert, coffee, whatever brings you joy tonight." Michael leaned back in his chair with a satisfied grin. "Well, that's convenient timing. I was going to order the chocolate souffle anyway, but Claire was looking around the restaurant with tears in her eyes, trying to identify their anonymous benefactor. Her gaze briefly met Daniel's, and something in his gentle smile made her wonder, though she couldn't be sure. "This is incredible," she whispered to Giuseppe. "Please tell whoever it was that this kindness means more to me than they could possibly know." Giuseppe nodded warmly. "I will certainly convey your gratitude." As the evening continued, Michael's true character became increasingly apparent. When their waiter accidentally spilled a drop of wine on the table, Michael berated him loudly enough to draw stares from other diners. When Claire gently suggested that accidents happen to everyone, Michael turned his criticism toward her. "You're too soft," he said dismissively. "That's probably why you're struggling financially." "You need to demand respect in this world." Claire's patience finally broke. "Struggling financially doesn't make someone less deserving of kindness, Michael, and treating service workers poorly says far more about your character than theirs." "Are you seriously lecturing me right now?" Michael laughed coldly. "I'm the one with a successful career here." "Success isn't just about money," Claire replied quietly but firmly. "It's about how you treat people, especially when they can't do anything for you in return." Emma, who had been listening to the raised voices despite Daniel's attempts to distract her, looked up at her father with concern. "Daddy, why is the mean man being so loud?" Daniel realized that his daughter was witnessing a valuable lesson about human nature, though not the kind he had planned for their celebration dinner. "Sometimes, Em, people show us who they really are without meaning to." Michael stood abruptly, throwing his napkin on the table. "You know what, Claire? Rachel was wrong about you. You're not worth my time." He stormed toward the exit, leaving Claire sitting alone at the table. Claire sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she began to smile. Not the forced, nervous smile she had worn all evening, but a genuine expression of relief. Giuseppe approached her table with concern. "Miss, are you all right? Would you like us to call a taxi?" "I'm better than all right," Claire said, laughing softly. "I just discovered that sometimes the worst dates lead to the best revelations. And Giuseppe, about that chocolate souffle Michael ordered, could I possibly get it to go? I have a feeling this evening is about to get much better." Daniel watched as Claire handled the situation with grace and humor, and felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced since his wife's death. This young woman had just been publicly humiliated by someone who should have been treating her with respect. Yet she was finding joy in the moment. Emma, who had been carefully observing the entire situation, made a decision that would change everything. Before Daniel could stop her, she slipped out of her chair and approached Claire's table. "Excuse me," Emma said politely. "I'm Emma, and that's my daddy over there. We saw what happened, and I wanted to tell you that the mean man was wrong. You seem really nice, and Daddy always says that nice people deserve good things." Claire looked down at this earnest little girl with her father's kind eyes and felt her heart melt. "Thank you, Emma. That's very sweet of you to say. What brings you and your daddy to such a fancy restaurant tonight?" "I had a piano recital, and I didn't mess up even once," Emma said proudly. "Daddy said we could go anywhere I wanted to celebrate, and I picked here because they have really good pasta and the candles are pretty." "A piano recital? That's wonderful. I bet you played beautifully." Emma beamed at the praise. "Would you like to meet my daddy? He's really nice, and he doesn't have anyone to talk to except me, which probably gets boring sometimes." Claire glanced over at Daniel, who was approaching their table with an apologetic expression and gentle smile. Up close, she could see the genuine warmth in his eyes and the way he looked at his daughter with pure adoration. "Emma, sweetheart, we shouldn't bother this lady during her dinner," Daniel said softly, though his eyes met Claire's with unmistakable interest. "It's no bother at all," Claire assured him. "Emma was just telling me about her piano recital. You must be very proud." "More than words can express," Daniel replied. "I'm Daniel Morgan, and I apologize for my daughter's boldness. She has a tendency to befriend everyone she meets." "Claire Matthews," she replied, standing to shake his hand. "And boldness is an admirable quality. Emma was actually cheering me up after a rather difficult evening." Daniel glanced at the empty chair where Michael had been sitting. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but you handled that situation with remarkable composure. Not everyone would have maintained their dignity so gracefully." "Experience," Claire said wryly. "Nursing school teaches you to deal with all kinds of difficult people. Though I have to admit, tonight tested even those skills." Emma tugged on her father's jacket. "Daddy, can Claire sit with us? She shouldn't eat alone after the mean man was so rude." Daniel looked at Claire with hope and uncertainty. "Emma's right, though I don't want to presume. You're welcome to join us if you'd like. We were just about to order dessert, and Emma would love to hear about nursing school. She's been talking about wanting to help people when she grows up." Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the restaurant's ambiance. For the first time all evening, she was being invited somewhere not because someone felt obligated, but because they genuinely enjoyed her company. "I would love that," she said, gathering her purse and the to-go container with the chocolate souffle. "And Emma, I'd be happy to tell you all about nursing school if you tell me more about piano." As they settled into Daniel's larger table, Claire felt as though she had stepped into an entirely different evening. Daniel was attentive without being overwhelming, asking thoughtful questions about her studies and listening to her answers with genuine interest. Emma was delightful, sharing stories about school and her friends with the infectious enthusiasm that only children possess. "You know," Daniel said as they shared a tiramisu that Emma had insisted they order, "I have tremendous respect for healthcare workers. After my wife passed away, the nurses were the ones who truly cared for our family during the most difficult time of our lives." Claire's expression softened with understanding. "I'm so sorry for your loss. That must have been incredibly difficult, especially with Emma being so young." "Thank you," Daniel said quietly. "It was the hardest thing we've ever faced. But it also taught us both the importance of kindness and the value of people who choose to spend their lives helping others heal." Emma looked up from her dessert. "Daddy says Mommy would be proud of how we take care of each other now. And I think she would like you, Claire, because you want to help sick people feel better." Claire felt tears prick her eyes at the simple profundity of Emma's statement. "That's the most beautiful compliment anyone has ever given me, Emma." As the evening wound down, Giuseppe approached their table with the check. Daniel reached for his wallet, but Claire gently placed her hand over his. "Daniel, you've already been so generous with your time and Emma's wonderful company. Please let me contribute something." Daniel smiled at her thoughtfulness, but shook his head. "Claire, tonight has been the best evening I've had in years. Sharing it with you has been my pleasure entirely." What Claire didn't know was that Daniel had been the anonymous benefactor who had covered her earlier meal. She never needed to know. The joy on her face throughout their conversation had been worth far more than any amount of money. As they prepared to leave, Emma suddenly grabbed Claire's hand. "Claire, would you like to come to my next piano recital? It's in 3 weeks, and I'm playing a really pretty song that I think you'd like." Claire looked at Daniel, not wanting to presume. He nodded with a smile that reached his eyes. "We'd both love to have you there, if you're interested." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Claire replied, and meant it. 6 months later, Claire stood in the same restaurant where they had first met. But this time, she was wearing a beautiful blue dress that Daniel had surprised her with. And Emma was beside her in a matching outfit. They were celebrating Claire's graduation from nursing school and her acceptance of a position at the children's hospital where she would specialize in pediatric oncology. Daniel had been there every step of the way, supporting her through final exams and celebrating every small victory. Emma had become the little sister Claire had always wanted, and their weekly piano recitals had become the highlight of all their weeks. "You know," Claire said to Daniel as they looked at the same table where her disastrous date had occurred, "I never properly thanked the person who paid for my meal that night." Giuseppe said they wanted to remain anonymous. Daniel smiled and squeezed her hand gently. "I think they would say that watching you bloom into the incredible woman, nurse, and friend you've become was thanks enough." Emma looked up at them with a knowing smile that was far too wise for her 9 years. "Daddy, are you going to tell her it was you, or do I have to?" Claire turned to Daniel with wide eyes. "It was you?" "Emma has many wonderful qualities," Daniel laughed, "but keeping secrets isn't one of them." Claire felt tears of gratitude and love fill her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," Daniel said, cupping her face gently, "the best gifts are given without expectation of recognition or reward. I wanted to help a kind person through a difficult moment, and in return, I received something far more valuable than I gave." "What's that?" Claire whispered. "A family," Daniel replied, pulling both Claire and Emma into a warm embrace. "The family I never dared hope we could have again." And in that moment, surrounded by the soft glow of Romano's candles and the love of the two people who had changed her life completely, Claire understood that sometimes the worst dates lead to the most beautiful destinations. If this story warmed your heart and reminded you that kindness always comes back to us in unexpected ways, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to believe in the power of compassion today. Subscribe for more heartwarming stories about how small acts of generosity can change lives forever, and let us know in the comments about a time when a stranger's kindness made a difference in your life. Your story might inspire someone else to be the miracle in someone's difficult day.